Well, very excited to welcome you to the show today, Ben Higgins. Welcome, Rebels of the Heart.
I'm pumped to be here. This is going to be a great conversation.
Likewise, yeah, it's been a long time in the making. Well, not that long, but a couple months in the making. For us, we've been talking about some different possibilities in our work, and it just felt really aligned to have you on and sharing the future of your work and what you've been building. And I think there's so much of your story that would be fascinating to our community. So we'll start off with kind of an easy question. And it's kind of a question I ask many people. Um, just share a little bit about your life story, but in the lens of being a rebel with a heart. Like, what is that? How's that showed up for you through your life's journey?
Oh man, I don't know if anybody, as much as I'd like them to, would ever probably say, "Okay, what are some of the characteristics of Ben?" And they'd say, "Well, he's a rebel." I like to personally find things that I've been a rebel within, and I think I can. So I grew up in the Midwest, Northern
Okay.
Indiana, an incredible place. Um, It is a very white, very Christian, very conservative town.
Mm,
Um, it used to be one of the Methodist capitals of the world, and so we
yeah.
had a lot happening there and a lot of history in.
Yeah.
And It's also a very wealthy town.
Okay.
So there's not a lot of pain and struggle, and if there is, there's usually a pretty solid group around to support that and lift that up and bring that out. And so grew up there, uh, went to Indiana University. After Indiana, I moved to South America.
Mm,
In between that time, I had visited some places with extreme poverty. Uh, and my world started to get rocked a little bit. Like everything I thought I knew, everything I thought was true to the world started to be put into question. And today we'd call it like a deconstruction, right, moment,
yeah.
or deconstruction season. But one of the things that I was really interested in, because I didn't necessarily want to just deconstruct, I wanted to reconstruct something. I wanted to build back some type of basis for my life, maybe for my faith, for my view of the world. And the only thing I kept leaning on is to focus on the outsider. I read Jesus's words, and it felt like Jesus was very intentional to me about focusing on the outsider, caring for the people that need it the most.
Mhm.
And then if I lived my life that way, maybe some stuff would start to make sense. And so I always kind of had that as my first building block back to reconstruction was that
Yeah.
okay, if all else fails, at least in life I cared for the outsider. And if none of the stuff that I grew up believing was true, if none of the stuff I grew up believing was working, at least I've lived my life not just focusing on myself. And I've always seen that to be a better
Yeah.
way. So that might be the first way I would
So
say
let's,
I was a rebel.
yeah. So before that, so I want to jump into that because it's
Yeah.
interesting. So because there's a lot of depth in that statement, in that story too. You talk about deconstructing what you thought you knew or what you've been taught or what you believe. What was that exactly?
Well, I think for me, a lot of it because of my upbringing in this town, like faith and and the community around faith was just a very prominent piece. Like it was kind of the only thing people did, right? You went to church for fun, you went to church on Sundays, you went to youth group to see your friends. Um, you know, everybody in the town, not this is a very general statement, but like in my world, everybody in the town was Christian. So like, why would you ever think anything other than this? Like everybody else seems to believe it.
Yeah.
Um, and when you start traveling outside of the northern Indiana in that bubble, you start to see that the world isn't that way. And so your worldview gets rocked, right? It's kind of like this, I call it the Santa Claus effect in my life, where
Yeah.
all of a sudden, you know, you see something being so true, you don't ever question it. And all of a sudden somebody says, yeah, but there could be, what about this? Or they start questioning you on the things that you held so dear to your heart. And you go, yeah, maybe I'm not right. Like I've never thought about this stuff.
Yeah. So
Uh,
give me some examples because this is somewhat rebel. I mean, you're going off the track, if you will, of how I mean, following a new possibility, right, of what your life could be. What were the influences that you started to see that made you question things, or how did you reevaluate certain things at that point, knowing? And I know the whole of your journey, but how did you, at that moment, where were you kind of rebelling, for lack of a better term, from what you'd been, how you'd been?
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think the rebellious side of that was, you know, I'm not living in Northern Indiana any longer, and I'm starting
Yeah.
to question. traditions and stories that I and the rest of the people around me, I believe, thought were true. And so, like, one example of that would just be learning about, you know, church history,
Yeah.
um, and the like conquistadors, and hearing about mass genocides and about the issues that maybe religion and society and culture have played to like fight against each other, and how, how horrid those moments are, right? Another big one was for me was we went to on a trip when I was a teenager to Central America, and we were passing out food boxes, and the way that people got food boxes is if they came to church. And so if they didn't come to church, sorry about you. That it doesn't really matter if you're starving. You're not getting a box. And so that started to like inks inside of me. Like, are we really only in
Yeah.
this to convert people? Like, is there no justice that, my faith believes in serving to people who need it? And those started to rock me. And those, I mean, it kind of just a spiral effect. It's kind
Yeah.
of like, deconstruction's always explained as like one brick from the middle comes down and then the rest starts to tumble. And it did. It just started to tumble. And I started to question everything.
Mm.
And it was a beautiful season of life. Not fun,
Yeah. Yeah.
not enjoyable, but it's a beautiful season for me now because, as I said, like the thing I never gave up on was the reconstruction part of that. Even if it
Right.
meant that my belief system would dramatically change, um, based on my reconstruction. I wanted to reconstruct something. I didn't want to be in limbo forever, or I wanted to understand what limbo meant and get really comfortable in that space and know that limbo might not all be bad.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it was like kind of a tumbling block of things that came up at that point.
Yeah.
Um, and again, the only thing I knew to be true still, which is wild to say, is that the more time I spent caring for the people on the outside looking in, or the people that believed they were on the outside looking in, or the people that felt like they were on the outside looking in, the richer my life became.
Mm.
And in a lot of ways, the simpler my life became, and the more exciting my life became, and the more love I felt in my life. And so, um, but I believe that was a calling, still from my, Christian faith, was that caring for the outsider was something that I felt like Jesus directly kind of told me to. And so I was like, well, I'll give this one a shot. And it worked. It still works.
Yeah.
Um, even if, I'm dealing with people who drastically disagree with me. But the rebellious side of that was that, I think people in my hometown were probably like desperately praying for me to find
Mm.
whatever it is again, my salvation again, my belief system again, to turn back to Jesus, whatever that meant. Um, and I would argue I never turned away. I would argue that I was actually falling closer in line with, um, my faith than I ever have before.
Yeah.
Uh, I just think it feels scary. It feels weird to the outside.
Yeah.
So
Rebellion
that was
from the
rebellious.
church culture, probably a term, not against the actual beliefs of what you felt. Or
Yeah.
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 So as you were gonna, as I directed you back there, what was the second phase that you were gonna go into as you
Mhm.
started thinking through your life? Because I think it'll be interesting to connect the dots as we go.
Yeah. So then I took a job in Denver.
Yeah.
It was with an IT company. I was writing user manuals. The reason I did that is because a girlfriend of mine told me I was never going to leave Indiana, that I was really comfortable there. And I'm an only child. And so, in a lot of ways, she was probably right. And I kind of said, no, you're wrong. I'm going to leave Indiana. And so, a couple months later, I took a job in Denver, moved to a city I had no friends.
Mm.
And I was working at a job that I was really bad at. Like, I was really bad at writing user manuals. I was not good at it, and I did not enjoy it. And it was kind of sucking the life out of me. And so during that time of kind of sitting in my house and sitting alone and letting my thoughts flow through me for entertainment and not talking to anybody, finally one day at work, the marketing director said, "Hey, there's this television show, um, that I really love. Ben, you don't like your job. That's very obvious. You don't have any friends out here. You aren't dating any longer. Will you go? Will you try to go on the show?" And so we sat down at the computer and I signed up. I said yes to it, with a lot of reasoning. Mostly, I just wanted to create a cooler story for my life. All of a sudden, life it became very monotonous and rhythmic and kind of robotic and sad. And I was
Mm.
like, as much as I'm a 4 on the Enneagram. So as much as I was feeling like, yes, that's just my lot in life, like to be
Yeah.
sad and to be lonely and to collect a paycheck. there was something inside me said, hey, maybe I should try to create a cooler story.
Yeah.
Maybe like I'll make more friends this way. Might have been like another selfish ambition. Maybe people will think I'm cool again.
Mm.
Um, and so, long story short, the show called. I ended up going on The Bachelorette first, which felt very weird to me. As the first time I'd ever been to LA. Yeah, it was not something I ever expected. And I was sitting in a cubicle on a Thursday, and on a Friday, I jumped on a plane to LA. And 2 days later, I was on national television for 3 months. And that period of life was, it's a weird thing for me to say, but it's the best thing probably that's ever happened to me tangibly in this world because because through that process, I did have a lot of time to think. I was surrounded by a lot of people. I was creating a cool story that people were going to be interested in hearing.
Yeah.
But I was learning a lot about myself too, because there's no distractions when you're in that environment. And the one thing I realized was, for as much as my life I had believed and tried to focus on the outsider the best I could, I was doing that because I also felt very much like an outsider.
Mm.
I very much felt like I was always on the outside looking in any situation that I was finding myself in. And so through that experience, I was able to communicate that openly for the first time. And I said on national TV, that I felt this way. And I was
Where'd
nervous.
that come from, out of curiosity? Where did that sense of feeling that way come from? Do you know? Or
Well, I mean, I think, I wrote a book on it. So I've done a lot of like soul searching on where this came from.
yeah.
Um, I can trace back the first maybe feeling I've ever had at this moment.
Okay.
And it's wild. I was sitting writing this book, and I was like, when did this happen for me? Or where's the first time I can remember it? And I wrote it down. I was like, this is so silly, because what happened was when I was in kindergarten,
Okay.
um, I had a reading class where, like, my whole class goes in for reading. And, again, I'm an only child. And so rejection and not feeling loved and not getting attention was not something that I was that was familiar to me within my household growing
Sure.
up. My parents were very caring.
Yeah.
Um, but we had partner reading, and the teacher goes, okay, pick a partner. You're going to read. And everybody else in the class had a partner. And then at the end of it all, I had gotten rejected 2 or 3 times, and I didn't have a partner. And so the teacher was like, hey, you're my partner today. And I knew what that meant. Like, I'm the one dude here that doesn't have a close enough friend.
Huh.
And I thought I did, to read with. And I remember that first feeling of rejection. So I write this in the book. Like, this is so silly, right? It's a little childhood memory. The book comes out, and it's wild how many adults related with those, like, kindergarten to, whatever age childhood memories that still affect their internal, like, consciousness and their internal, like, insecurities today. And
Yeah.
so, I don't, it's more validated in my opinion. This is a story that did affect me,
Yeah.
that did change the way I saw the world. Um, Now, after the book and having other people go, yeah, I feel that way too.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you for sharing that. So keep going. Keep going your story. So bring it
Yeah.
back. So you share this in an audience on a national stage.
Yeah. 10
Yeah.
million people see it.
Yeah.
And I remember the episode, I was really nervous for it because most of the time on the show, I kind of stayed like a wallflower. I was kind of quiet, just kind of did my thing and didn't
Yeah.
really disrupt the system. And so this is the first time that vulnerability had really ever been a part of my life. And it was also getting displayed to 10 million people on a Monday evening. And the response was wild. The response was so positive. The response from people being like, I feel that way too. I can relate with you. It just felt like every day things were flooding in with people being like, hey, you're not alone. You're not the only one out there that sees themselves in this light.
Yeah.
And in that little season, I started to reconstruct again. I started to heal again because I started to notice a thread line where if other people feel the same way I feel and can relate with my insecurities and my feeling of being alone, I'm actually not alone at all, because maybe the thing that connected us the most was that we feel alone. Uh, and so that was like a nugget that I held on to because it was proving to be true. Um,
Mm.
Fast forward, then they asked me to become the Bachelor. There wasn't a lot in that period of time for me to like do a lot of self-discovery. It's pretty much like a full-time job, and you're kind of head down running. But what the Bachelor does is it kind of gives you like 15 minutes, and I would argue maybe like 25 minutes of fame. It catapults you from being this dude sitting in the cubicle in the bottom of the basement of an IT company, which I was still doing. I never quit my job. And so I was taking a sabbatical, and I filmed the show and then I go back to work.
Yeah.
Um, from being that guy to then on a Friday evening being on a red carpet with cameras taking pictures of you and headlines wondering who you're dating and why you're dating them and where your life's at.
Mm.
And so you have this like glimpse and this glimmer of what the celebrity life looks like or feels like. And you have people seeking after you. And remember, like most of my life, all of my life,
Yeah.
I had felt like the outsider. And so for the first time in a long time, like if there's not a way you want to feel like the outsider, it's just having, millions of people like try to take some flesh from you and say, hey, can I get this from you? Can I share this with you? What's going on in your life? And so that was the big changing moment for me. Was more post show, was like trying to handle what this looked like as you are doing something that's very unnatural, very unexpected, and that you haven't really earned. That's an important piece here for me. Was I didn't really earn this platform. I didn't really earn this like notoriety. It was really handed to me. I mean, I think there's things you do after the show, and hopefully you treat your platform
Yeah.
well and you try to do good with it. But you don't get a platform from going on reality television because you have any tangible skill set. I got my platform because I agreed to date very untraditionally in a very weird environment with 30 people. Um,
Let me ask you this question. So
yeah.
this is fascinating. So did you actually go on the show expecting on some level that you actually would find love? Like, or was that just kind of like, yeah, if that happens, great? Or was it like or did you actually intend or desire or expect to actually find that?
I don't think I put all my eggs in the basket of that. I wasn't going, yes, this is my one shot at it. But I thought it was, I mean, I think, and I still think it was a really good opportunity to potentially find somebody. You have 30 people showing up that know who you are, that have probably done a little bit of research and said, hey, I'm interested enough in this guy, or I'm interested enough in this TV show to
Yeah.
say, yeah, this guy isn't terrible. He's not terrible. I'll at least go see if it works out. Um, and so, yeah, I kind
Yeah.
of thought like, hey, when was the last time in my life? I mean, I hadn't gone on 30 dates probably ever.
Right.
And so then I was going to have the opportunity to date 30 people. So, the odds were good. I don't think I
Yeah.
was like sold out on this being my one and only shot.
Yeah. Gotcha.
So the show happens. I'm dealing with this newfound fame. I'm working through all of it. And my faith was still very important to me. And so I'd say that's another little nugget of my rebellious side. Was I was still very much focused on my faith. However, the fame definitely was starting to take over. And I remember the moment. I was sitting in an airport. I had just gotten back from some really cool event where I'd met like all these A-list celebrities and had all these amazing conversations and dinner and cocktails with
Yeah.
all these people. And I called up two of my buddies to tell them about it. And they were kind of like, they weren't asking any follow-up questions.
Yeah.
They didn't really care that much. They're like, that's cool. And then they're like, hey, did you see the game last night? And I was like, yeah, but did you like hear? Like, I met this person, and like, what? Turn on your TV at 6 o'clock, you'll see me. Like, that's cool. But did you see the game last night? And so I called my third friend and I was like, man, I'm feeling really lonely.
Mm.
I'm doing all this cool stuff, but like nobody in my life seems to care
Mm.
about any of this cool stuff. And nobody in my life is really like sharing these moments with me. My family, isn't around for this. They're not invited to the red carpet. My friends don't have much of an interest in it. I feel very lonely. And he said something to me that moment that I'll never forget. He said, well, that makes sense. He goes, because you are like doing this all kind of by
Alone.
yourself.
Yeah.
What if this whole thing was never meant to be about you? Like, what if you could use this platform that you've been handed? Because you've told me, he said, you've told me before that it feels weird to have a platform now.
Yeah.
What if it could be about something bigger than you? What do you care about? And I was like, immediately I flashed back to, hey, I've always cared about the outsider. I've always cared about fighting poverty and fighting human facing injustice. Maybe he's right. Maybe I could have a lot of fun. Maybe this could be really selfishly beneficial for me. because I'm going to be able to create even a cooler story because of this platform, doing the things that I've always dreamed of doing, but just not knowing how to do it. And maybe there's an option where I don't have to sit in a cubicle in the bottom of a basement and work a job that I'm really bad at anymore. Maybe I could take this and use this to make this a career of mine. Maybe this could be my new focus, is building things and working within things because of the platform I have, to try to do what I've always dreamed of, which was to care for the outsider.
Yep.
And that was a pivot point for me. Immediately, it started to make sense. Immediately, the weight of fame felt like it wasn't there anymore. My search for relevancy wasn't required. It wasn't necessary. It didn't feel like something I had to do. What now I had to do was figure out how I could use what I'd been handed and given to make the impact that was healthy and helpful and not hurtful for people who needed it.
It's a beautiful
Uh,
quote. I'm sure that we'll quote that one out for sure.
cool.
Keep going,
It's
man.
always good when you have a quote. Sometimes it makes people sound smarter than they are when you like pull a quote out. Um, but yeah, that was the pivot point for me. And so everything from then on became more of a focus on how do I do something not so focused on myself. So I'll tell you, the search for relevancy is exhausting.
Mm.
Um, and it falls short every time, especially when you're on reality television.
Yeah.
But I'm sure you could talk to, I always, now when I do a speaking engagement, I always, share, if I'm talking about fame, I was like, name the most famous person from 75 years ago right now off the top of your head. Like, just do it. Some people can pull out a couple people that were movie stars and singers, and they can be like, oh yeah, this guy came out with this song, right?
Yeah.
But in their day, everybody knew their name, right? Everybody knew everything about them. They were playing them on the radio. They were,
Yeah.
following along however they did back then through the newspapers. But today they're like fame, and if fame is their legacy, that legacy is not going to last.
Right.
And so the search for fame feels like it, it's very fleeting, and it's
Yep.
dust in the wind. And so, for me, back when I came off the show, everybody cared about, how famous I was going to stay. That was, what my team around me did. And when I finally gave that up, it became a lot more fun for me.
Awesome. So
Yeah.
what did you start building? Tell us about now it's getting us closer to the present day or
Yep.
on the way to that. Tell us about how you've converted that platform of fame into a platform of contribution.
Yeah. So, when I told you the story about when we went to Central America, that specifically was Honduras.
Yeah.
And Honduras at the time had been kind of hit by Hurricane Mitch.
Yeah.
An already impoverished country had now lost pretty much everything. Right. And so it became a very, desolate place. And so when I went for the first time, my heart was torn too there because of the kids that were starving, because of the poverty that existed. In response to handing out food boxes to people who go to church, my buddy started a nonprofit called Humanity Hope United. And Humanity Hope United was focused on a few things, but mostly going into communities and asking them, what do you need? What do you want? What do you dream of? And then at the very end, how can we help? And it was led by the communities. And it was a partnership that would be with these communities for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, however long it needed to take to build up some type of sustainable impact in their lives. And it was working, and it was incredible. And I was actively involved before the show and after the show. And my platform obviously expanded the fundraising and expanded the influence of this nonprofit. But I was still working at the IT job at the time. And the founder of that organization, I went on kind of a soul searching trip for me. And on this trip, we ran into a random guy at dinner one night who had a coffee farm who invited us there. We went out to the coffee farm and we saw coffee for the first time. We saw the beauty of coffee. We saw some of the injustices that were existing around the coffee trade. And we came back to the US and we started a company called Generous. And Generous is best known for coffee. It still exists today. It's still my full-time job, even though I don't get paid for it. But this company has committed, because of the people involved within it, to donate 100% of the profits to organizations and to nonprofits that are fighting for humans around the world and domestically. And so Generous, if you can see it as it's a for-profit company, but we want to be the engine behind these nonprofits that are helping them function, because we knew and saw how important that was. So that's what I do today. I'm kind of, I laugh and I love it. I believe Generous can be like the hidden fundraising piece that funds for the pens and papers of people who are working really hard to help people around the world build a sustainable and healthy life.
Yeah.
And so that's one piece. The reason I'm able to do it for free, it's not all charity for me. I also work for iHeartRadio, and so I was able. It's funny. As soon as I committed to quitting my job in IT and moving over to work for Generous, even though at the time the model was, hey, I was going to take a salary from Generous. But I was like, I don't know how I'm going to do that. It's a startup company that isn't exactly like selling loads of coffee at this point. It's brand new. iHeartRadio called and said, hey, we want to offer you a 6-year contract and
Six
to
years.
host
Hey,
couple shows for you, and that still exists today. And so I'm able to work for iHeart, as often as they need me to, and then the rest of the time really focus on Generous and focus on helping grow this company.
it's awesome, man. And how do you choose the nonprofits and initiatives that Generous supports?
So we have a few criteria. They have to be human focused, and so we always say, I have to caveat it these days. We care about the environment. We care about animals. I have a dog. Love my dog. He lives a good life. But our lane that we chose is humans, and so that's kind of the lane we're going to stay in. It helps us be specific. They have to have a sustainable mission, and so the best kind of example of that I can give is, if you're working with a company that is helping alleviate people out of sex trafficking, that's awesome. But we want to see the cycle close, meaning we want to get people out, we want to get them the help and the mental help and the care that they need, the counseling that they need. And then we want to see that organization also invest into getting those people back out into a healthy environment and
Yeah.
functioning in the world. So that's kind of, and, we do that with community development, sustainable change in community development, sustainable change in personal lives. So they have to have a sustainable mission. They have to be effective in their mission. So they have to, show us that they're doing what they say they're doing and they're doing it well. And then finally, they have to be efficient with their funds. And so, again, we love funding for the pens and paper in your workplace. We know that's a necessity when
Yeah.
you're running a nonprofit. However, we want to see that, the money that we're donating to you is being used, efficiently to go after the mission as well. And that's really it. And then it comes down to like kind of a personal relationship with these nonprofits, what we kind of call a dating process, getting to know them, getting to see their team, hopefully going on the ground with their team. And then it's a very fun kind of partnership once we
Yeah.
do all this to say, hey, let's do this together.
It's awesome, man. And how has your faith journey kind of continued to show up through all of this? When you think about that, because that was kind of an undercurrent through all
Yeah.
this. How is that kind of present in this?
Oh, that's awesome. Well, I'm still very much a doubter and a questioner. And so if you're going to hang out with me in any type of faith setting where faith seems to be a topic, you're going to hear me ask a lot of questions because I just don't know if there's that many clear answers on anything. However, this journey of mine, however you want to call it, has brought me closer to um, a source, to Jesus, to hearing and reading Jesus in a new light. I just got back from Israel this year, and
Nice.
um, it once again kind of fired me up for just if I know nothing else, if I know nothing else in this world, I know that the God that I serve called me to care for others and called me to be helpful, not hurtful in this world. And as the more I do that, the closer in I feel to that source, and the more stories I get connected with that are affected by
Yeah.
God as well. And so that's been awesome. Again, with the undercurrent that there's still a lot of doubt and still a lot of questions, and there's probably always going to be. I've kind of settled with, hey, it's more fun to ask questions than it is for me just to sit on the sidelines. The other interesting part is, now, and this is kind of funny. I spoke at a church not that long ago, and it's a church I'd been to a few times as a participant, as kind of sitting out in the audience. And I spoke there, and which is cool, right? Now churches trust me. It's a risk, right? How do you have a reality television guy stand on your stage? But they trust me, I think, enough now for me to get up on stage. And I was standing there, and all of a sudden it hit me. Like I didn't even think about this until then. That because I went on reality television, now people want to hear what I have to say. I've been validated somehow through reality television, or I've a platform all of a sudden means that, my story should be heard. And it just hit me of how many other people are sitting out in the audience
The
that maybe
story.
don't have a platform, that haven't been handed and gifted an opportunity to go on television, that also have something to say. The message that I shared was a message that I had been holding on to for years of my life, way before the show. And now, because I went on a show and dated people and kissed people on national television, now people in my kind of community and tribe thought, hey, we should listen to this guy. Think that's an interesting idea, that for whatever reason, fame seems to validate. And I don't know if it should. I'm happy it does for me because I like doing what I'm doing, but it's a weird thing. And so there's also been this kind of, existential crisis with me of like, what, again, like kind of in this season right now, like, what does all this mean? What is this doing? And is it doing good? And so, part of my mission or purpose now is elevating voices who maybe don't have a platform and trying to hear what they're sharing and what they have to say.
And how are you doing that out of curiosity? Because obviously, that's in many ways, that's what LifeGuides does, right? We give people we're giving the platform for people to share their experiences,
No.
their stories, their contributions in direct service of other people. Um, but how are you approaching that same topic or that same objective?
Great. Yeah. Well, again, this isn't meant to be a shameless plug. It's been
It's
over
all
a
good.
year since it came out. But my book, I had the cool opportunity of writing about loneliness and
Yeah.
writing about connecting people. So it's broke up into 4 parts: connection with self, connection with others, connection and romance, and connection with God. And so in that book, I was able to share 6 stories from people who have no platform, but have impacted me greatly. So that's one way. At Generous, we do have an ambassador program. So we have an ambassador program for people to sign up for. It's free. You get great discounts with it. And the whole purpose of that ambassador program is to have an excuse to live a generous lifestyle,
Yep.
to share your story with others. And if it gets awkward and weird when you hand a bag of coffee or when you just show up to somebody's door, you have the excuse to say, hey, I'm here because I thought of you, or I wanted to keep in touch with you. Here's my story. And the reason I'm doing this is because this company asked me to do it. And I believe that a generous lifestyle is the way to go. So that's another way, right? And then I have a speaking series that was just announced called Come Sit With Me. Come Sit With Me is, designed for all age groups. There's different tiers on kind of what you speak about and what you share about. Because if you're in high school, you're dealing with things different than if you're, an executive at a highest level of a Fortune 500 company.
Yeah.
But the idea of this is building connection points with others, allowing and creating the space for people to sit with each other, allowing the space for people to look left and right in their worlds a little bit and say, who in my life right now is hurting, and how can I reach out to them? How can I be a support to them? How can I be with them in this moment? Or it's as simple as, walking into a restaurant. Another day, my wife and I did this, went on a little date, and we walked in this restaurant, and there's this old man sitting alone at a table. He had a great dinner in front of him. He had a beer in front of him, but you could tell he was alone. And so, like, reaching out to those people, say, hey, what's going on? Tell me your story. Like, what's life up to today? Just touching people the best you can, and trying to, for me with the Come Sit With Me tour, is kind of like remind you that this is a good way to live life, that
Yeah.
this is a healthy way to live life, no matter how powerful you are, or no matter how um, low you feel. The more you reach out to the outsider, the richer life becomes.
Yeah. So specifically with the program, with the Come Sit With Me tour, is it a program or is it just an initiative that you're doing? Like, tell me more specifics about how it. I mean, obviously, I understand the concept, but like, is there a model by which you're doing this? Like, where you're, is it like, talk a little bit more about specifics? Yeah.
Yeah, I would say it's both. If I could answer that way, the initiative is really to create the space. The
Sure.
initiative is to continue to encourage and show that the more we reach out to the
Got it.
outsider, the richer life becomes. And so there's a little bit of like a missional movement statement in that, is to just implement that into people's lives, right? The program is showing ways to do that.
Got it.
The program is, allowing uh, to implement something into your workplace or something
Right.
into your school system to show, that this is sustainable, that it doesn't just happen in one moment, that it happens over time, that it happens if you're in high school, it happens through college, and when you become
Yeah.
adults, if you're an adult, it shows the benefits in your workplace, it shows the
Right.
benefits to your own personal life, right? I mean, how many executives, and you've obviously been around many,
Yeah.
I've worked with many in my life, in my circle, and all of them feel very alone. Like they're at the top of the tier in
Yeah.
their world, and they might be able to reach out to like some other company's executive and say like, but their support system becomes very small when you're at the top.
We
So
were
they
just
feel
talking
very
about
alone. And so how do you, as an executive within these organizations, create the space for you also to sometimes be vulnerable? What does that look like? How do you do that in a wise way so that it creates a better culture and it trickles
that.
down through your employees and your staff? So there's multiple different facets to this idea. But it really is it's a very simple reminder
Yeah.
to, hey,
You're teaching this though. You're actually going and developing, they're teaching this
yeah,
concept in
yeah.
organizations, and teams, and churches and communities. All those are going to be exactly.
Yeah, again, it just was launched,
Cool.
2 months ago, so if I said I was teaching it actively right now, I'd be lying to you. We've done it,
Nice.
and we're still working through it and working on it, but the idea, and the concept is very much created.
So let me ask this question. This is actually an interesting. Do you feel now less alone, like in this, in the whole scheme of this theme or thread of your life, this in this season? Do you feel not alone, or do you still feel that sense of
Yeah.
outsiderness?
Yeah. Well, I'm married now, and so that helps because I had somebody say, "Hey, I want to live and be with you for the rest of my life," and so that does help the
Yeah,
aloneness piece. But yes, not all the time. It's a lot less frequent. It still comes up,
yeah,
especially it maybe comes up more today in envy and jealousy than it does anything else. Where I go, why not me? Like, what's wrong with me that somebody hasn't asked me to be at that party or be a part of that program or part of that event?
yeah,
Envy and jealousy. But the cool part about over the last few years is I've really started to speak openly on it.
yeah.
Um, I've been given tools and I've been given a community that has allowed me to also start speaking truth into myself
Mm,
so that these feelings of being alone don't haunt me anymore. Um, they don't paralyze me with depression or anxiety or fear or envy. I have some tools now in my repertoire to use. And then also, because of the life that I've been handed, and again, back to the people seeing this on television,
yeah,
a community was built around it where it's really hard for me to feel alone because I know as soon as I start feeling this way, somebody else is out there feeling the same way.
yeah,
And again, maybe the thread line through all this is not that, we can all connect through each other's successes and joys. Maybe the thread line through all this is as humans, we actually connect at a deeper level through our pains and sorrows. And I've been able to kind of work with that in my life and see that, hey, I'm connected to others because of some of my moments of feeling the lowest.
yeah. And I think it's both, right? I think it's that's really what it's being able to connect at all those different levels. But I
Be
think that's
awesome if it could.
right. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what's being called for. I think that's, back to your faith journey. I think that's the opportunity, right? Is to all of it. It's all part of that connection. It's my own
Yeah.
personal opinion and belief. Ben, how can people learn more about Generous, about your work, about this new come sit with me program?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, with Generous, it's generouscoffee.com. The best way to support us, there's kind of two levels there is to buy our coffee. People, it's the best, we are a business and we are selling coffee, and that's the best way to support us. You can do that for your own household, specialty grade coffee. So my little sales pitch, but then also, we're about 50-50 retail, and we also have a wholesale program that allows our coffee to get into workplaces or be corporate gifts. The cool part about kind of where we're seeing the world go is the common swag that people hand out at conferences end up in the trash, and they have for years and years. And so coffee or some of our other products, tea, t-shirts, mugs, those things, actually are lasting. So people use them. And so we're really entering into that space. And so if you're somebody out there who has a need for corporate gifts, we would love to satisfy that need. And you can just do it through our website. The Come Sit With Me tour is best found out about through a very, very narcissistic website that I did not want to choose. But benhiggins.com had been taken by somebody. And so I had to go with the next best thing, which is the benhiggins.com. I do not claim to be the one and only. I do not claim to be the best, but it is the best option for websites. So the benhiggins.com has everything about to come sit with me program and tour. So, and then Instagram for me is really what I stay most up with. It's
Cool.
higgins.ben. I haven't quite invested too much time into any other social platforms because I just don't understand how you can do that and also be healthy. And
Yeah.
so I just pretty much stick with Instagram.
Awesome. Well, Ben, I'll just say for the audience here, we are big proponents and supporters of generous and using
Yeah,
it for
you are.
goals and life guides. And I'm excited to be, in connection with you and knowing that, you're earning your platform and that together we're going to do some really great work. And, obviously the mission of what you're doing with Come Sit With Me is incredibly aligned with what we're doing with
Yeah.
life guides with rebels. And so, just it's wonderful to know you. I'm happy to hear and support you on your own journey of development, spiritual and just business development. And it's cool to count you as a friend. And I appreciate you sharing your story today with our audience.
Well, thanks a lot, Derek. I will say if I looked at generous and I said, what has been the coolest? Um, there's been probably two connections this year so far that I would celebrate and be like, this is awesome. And Life Guides and you and your team is within those two. And so I'm excited. It's very much aligned. And so I can't wait to see what happens.
Awesome. Thank you, Ben. We will be in touch and more to come from this collaboration soon. Thank you all.